Hi Abby. So today's video is going to be of the circle walking single palm form. And this form actually sort of serves double value in a certain sense. In the first sense, it flows and melds perfectly with the three previous forms that I had showed you in the three previous videos, particularly the one immediately previous to this, which was the turning single palm, just to bring it back into memory. So so that form is closely related with this one because this one is essentially turning single palm with circle walking added to it. Now, there's a couple of little details to it that I'll have to highlight. I want to make sure that I highlight them because they are important to how the form is practiced, and kind of because of how the the camera work is oriented. It might be like a little bit complicated. So essentially, the way that it works is as I'm going to be walking the circle. The other thing is I'm probably going to go out of frame a little bit as I do, but as one walks the circle in this form, essentially it works symmetrically in the sense that a practitioner, for instance, would walk the circle. Since there's 8 steps in each circle, and I'll explain that a little bit more in a bit. You'd walk, let's say, 2 sets of eight steps in a clockwise direction. With the right hand forward, right foot starting forward, and then you'd want to turn and then go in a clockwise direction, this time with the left foot starting forward and the left hand toward the center of the circle. And that turning part is the part that I want to try to highlight because it's a bit particular. And so what I'm going to do is, after I just show you just basically how I'm going to display the circle walking, and hopefully it's a bit tricky because I'm going to try to do the turns while I'm on camera so that you can see them. But that's also why I'm going to highlight those 2 particular aspects in the turn, both the bottom half of the body, the footwork in particular, and the upper half, what's happening there. So for the footwork, what I'm going to do is, in a bit, I'm going to take the phone and reverse the camera, and I'm going to walk the circle and do the turns with the camera pointed at my feet. And I'm sorry if it gets a little clumsy, but I'm going to try to do the best I can. And then for the turning part, for the upper part, the hands, I'm going to just have the camera essentially oriented this way and try to get closer to it so you can see how it works. But before I get to that, a couple things about this form. First of all, I had already mentioned that in walking the circle, the idea here is to symmetricize how it's practiced, in the sense that the number of times that you walk around the circle should be even on both sides. So if you do 2 sets or 4 sets on one side, you want to do 2 or 4 on the other side. The other thing to note is that it can get really tricky if somebody is practicing this as a process of learning the martial art of Bagua-shan. Here what we're doing is we're focusing on it as Qigong. So we're using the rudimentary forms as an energy cultivation system first. So technically, what we're doing is, Qigong, generally speaking, tends to be yin forward. The foundation is yin. So specifically, like the earth and water, or in the Chinese system, wood, metal, and water, formulates the sort of structure for it. And then the yang elements, the earth and the fire, kind of fills it out from there. It's kind of the flesh on the form. It's starting with energy cultivation. Then you have yang forms, which are typically the martial arts, of whatever style they might be, where it's the inverse. The foundation of it, the foundational structure is yang. It's the air and fire elements, and then sort of the earth, or wood, metal, and water elements, and then fill out the flesh of it later on. We're starting with the earth and water elements. We're starting with energy cultivation. The martial arts, typically, a lot of times teachers will tell you, well, we'll kind of get to, except the internal martial arts, which emphasize the Qigong more. In the martial arts, they'll typically tell you, if you're with a teacher and you ask them in the beginning, like, is there kind of an energy cultivation aspect to this Qigong and things like that, they'll usually tell you that's something that you get to later. So this isn't a matter of what's better or than one or the other. It's a matter of disposition. I wouldn't necessarily say preference, but it's a matter of disposition, and how different souls have different ways of learning, have different inborn priorities that they're set with. And personally, for me, I find that starting from the Qigong, it just makes sense also to me, because the whole point here is that Qigong means the way of cultivating life energy, subtle energy. The subtle energy that formulates the basis of effectively form, material reality, movement within manifestation. So it only makes sense to me that one would want that to be the foundation, the initial starting point, in their practice. But there's also, an argument to be made that depending on someone's disposition, you can reverse that, and you can start from the yang. So I just wanted to cover that a little bit, and so basically, as far as the practical elements are concerned, in this circle, where I was going with that was that when someone is practicing Baguazhang as the martial art, sort of the yang path, the number of steps, the size of the circle, it can get very, very precise. And here, we're really trying to maintain a golden mean principle, where we don't want to be too tense, nor too lax. Qigong is all about, it's all about naturalness, really returning to an original state of naturalness, and kind of like allowing the energy to open up the channels that are obstructing our inherent naturalness from expressing itself most fully. So you'd even find in the yang martial style of Baguazhang, you'd find there are people who practice, teachers who are really invested in the yang of it. They'll have blocks, blocks about this high that are equidistant around a circle. And the practitioner, they'll walk on the blocks around the circle, like thousands of times to really program it in. There are also different styles of walking in Baguazhang, lion stepping, mud walking. We're not going to really go over any of that. We're really going to emphasize just sort of a naturalness. We want to be secure in our steps, but we also don't want to add in too much tension by being attempting to be excessively precise. So what we're going to do is where I was kind of going with that was, when somebody trains like that, there's also an emphasis on precision as far as where someone ends up when they complete one circle. So one circle completed, there's an expectation that they wind up in exactly the same spot every time. We're not going to worry as much about that. We want to make sure that our footsteps are generally even, but we don't want to get too tense about that. So the way that we walk the circle is we count out 8 steps for each circle, for each round. And then we start another one, and then, so we're counting steps in order to keep track of where we are in the process. As far as the actual walking itself, we have to make sure that we are sort of sunk into our root, into our stance sufficiently enough, because here it's going to become really even more important than in the Tai Chi Qigong that we've been doing previously. The 2 forms embrace the tree and opening the gate and turning cloud, because here, if you notice, the bottom of the body is facing aligned with the circumference of the circle. The top of the body, however, is turned toward the center of the circle. As you're walking, it's supposed to maintain its position at the center of the circle, focused upon the center. Okay? And what tends to happen sometimes is, especially in the beginning when someone's just learning, is as they're walking the circle, the body tends to like come back into alignment with the bottom half of the body. And kind of like, so it's really important. It's really important to focus on that in the beginning. There's a lot of waist activation here. I mean, as you will certainly feel while you're doing this, a lot of it. Because essentially, the top half of the body, especially when you get out to the arms, is in a 90-degree angle relationship relative to the bottom half of the body. It's not a natural, well, it's not in alignment with our ordinary conditioning in life, but it is spiritually natural according to how the subtle energy is working in the system. So Bagua there are many aspects to it that can seem quite esoteric. I mean, I'm not even getting into like the philosophy behind it, how it relates to the I Ching. The I Ching, the divination system in China that's thousands of years old, is actually intimately correlated with how Bagua works, and that only becomes evident later on. There's all kind. I already talked with you, I think, about its roots, the circle walking in particular, the roots in the prayer style of Taoist priests walking around a tree. And there's a lot of esoteric and occult principles to this art in particular. I mean, more than any other actually. But here we are, we're keeping it on a simple level, but that does not in any way diminish the profundity of it. So that's really the point of the practices that I'm sharing with you, is that accessible, but also profound. So that sweet spot of where the two coalesce, where the two are inclusive within what we're doing. So there's generally eight steps to each circle, and it can get complicated because there's also like this calculation that kind of needs to take place if one is going to be really precise about it, where like this between the size of the circle and then of course how we step, like how far we step, the breadth of our steps. Again, I don't want you to worry too much about that. Keep a light focus on the relative evenness of the steps. But as you're walking around the circle, just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So, I'm generally winding up more or less where I was. And then comes the turning. Now, what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to go through a couple of cycles of the walking more or less as it's done so that you can see it in total. Then I'm going to highlight those particular parts, the footwork with hopefully it'll work out with the camera, me kind of carrying it as I'm going. And then I'll show you how the turn works on with the upper body and the hands in particular, the hands and the arms. Then I'll do the whole thing again to display it as it's meant to be practiced, and then just do a little bit of closing at the end. So where we're going to start off here is this is also important to note. In this practice, the next form that we do, which is Bagua Qigong, and then the final form, which I talked about with you, that compilational form, which is Celestial Sphere Qigong. The stance is a little bit different. We're concentrating our stance. We're concentrating our root more in these practices as we've gone along, relative to the previous ones. In the previous ones, the feet are relatively parallel and they're shoulder length apart. The feet are shoulder width apart. In these practices, now in this one, so in this one and the next two, the feet are going to be closer together as we concentrate our root. So I'd say you want the feet to be, and this stands for the next two forms as well, you want the feet to be, let's say, I guess about I suppose 4 to 6 inches. I guess I'm not great at estimating distances, but it looks to me like about 4 to 6 inches. So you should notice that it's definitely closer. They're definitely closer together than they are when they're shoulder width apart. So maybe if you go down the body, it looks to me like it's quite well aligned with, rather than shoulder width apart, it's sort of like the width of the neck column. That makes sense. It looks like it aligns that way. So that might be a good reference. So for the instep of the foot, it's aligned with the outer lines of the neck as you go up. So I had never thought of it like that before, but it actually works out quite well. So so the feet are a little bit closer together now than they were before, and we're gonna, oh, here we go. Okay, I'm gonna go to the frame. So we're gonna start there, and then what's gonna happen is we're gonna go from this posture into, we want to turn the left foot. We're going to start with the right hand and the right foot forward on this one. So we're going to go clockwise first, okay? So what we want to do first is actually turn our left foot, which is going to be the back foot, outward just a little bit, just a little, just to make sure that we can keep our balance, okay? So I want to leave that option open for you. It's not necessary. If you feel like your balance, when you bring what is going to be your dominant foot out along the circumference of the circle, you may feel very well as if the balance is just fine if you keep your feet parallel. But I want to leave the option open for you to turn your what is going to be the back foot, in this case the left foot, outward just a little bit, so that you can maintain your balance. Okay? So you can do that if you want, or you don't have to. It's just an option. Then you want to draw the hands up along the center line of the body, and then turn. And as you turn, you're going to have to sink your stance down a little bit in order to activate the root energy and enable the waist involvement, the extraordinary waist involvement that comes along with Bagua practice. So as you do that, up and then turn and bring the hands outward. Now, I believe I spoke about this in the last video. Hope you can still hear me. My air conditioner is a little bit loud. But so I'm going to show you the feet in more detail when I do this, when I highlight them. So don't worry. But so now, having brought your hands out, what you want is the dominant arm, the right arm, to be relatively at shoulder level. And you notice there's a little bit of an angle in both of the hands. The bottom hand is going to be sort of in what can feel like a guard position, both from forward and also to the side. And the dominant hand is toward the center of the circle. And you don't want it to be extended to a lock, nor do you want it too compressed. This kind of golden mean balance is a principle that you're going to find particularly emphasized, fairly universally, but especially in Qigong, especially in Tai Chi and Bagua. So the non-dominant hand, the guard hand, would be right about at the level of the inner elbow. And this stands for both sides, by the way, obviously, just with the arms reversed. And inner elbow and a little bit lower, like a little bit above the waist level. Okay? And we want the fingers and the hands themselves to be structured but relaxed. And you're going to feel some tension, especially in the beginning, in particularly the shoulders and around the muscles of the back where the scapula is. Okay, and then from here, you would begin your walk around the circle while holding making sure the waist is activated and turning toward the center, so that the particularly the dominant hand, can be pointed directly at the center of the circle as you walk around, as you shift. Now, I just want to mention one other thing about what's going on here with the energy. So, the reason why this is often considered, one of the reasons I should say, there's many, one of the reasons why this is often considered a more advanced practice is because of how it works with the energy. I mentioned the geometry of the spiral now. It's beyond lines and circles. We're dealing with spirals now, which is arguably the most advanced geometry, particularly when it involves energy cultivation. I should say subtle energy cultivation. Now, the geometry of the body as it's moving in whatever form one finds oneself in is directly correlated with how the energy is being cultivated and shaped. That's the point, the relationship between form and energy, and utilizing them together to encourage one another, I guess you could say. So, one thing about Qigong that I will mention, just as an aside before I continue, is that I had mentioned how it's sort of like the rudiments of music, like scales and chord progressions, is to music, that formulate the basic elements out of which it's structured. Well, to continue on with that analogy, you might have noticed in these videos I've said things like Tai Chi Qigong and Baguazhang Qigong. Well, there are certain forms of Qigong which are sort of like almost like styles of their own. Like there's something called Wild Goose Qigong, which isn't necessarily directly correlated with any other style of martial art or anything like that. However, most styles of Qigong are associated with particular styles, like Tai Chi or like Bagua, and are specifically their geometry and their energy signatures are correlated with those styles. So it's sort of like chord progressions which are specifically emphasized in jazz music, sort of like that, or rhythmic structures that are particular to salsa music, that kind of thing. So in this case, what's happening here as one has the waist turned is that you can kind of imagine what's happening here is that the energy that's been cultivated in previous practices, in one's previous practice life, this is sort of its home, if you will, the dantian, the overall sort of waist region. So what's happening here is as someone's turning the waist, the geometry of it is that try to imagine a sponge that's sort of like being twisted, and how the effect that has in the water that is contained within it. It's sort of like it adds this force, this pressure, this flush that sort of amplifies the transmission of that energy through both ends, through the bottom and also the top end of the occult anatomy, I guess you could say, the subtle energy anatomy of the body. So it's really like it's like a supercharged sort of effect, and that's why I think I mentioned to you. For me particularly, everyone has their own kind of variation on their individual experience. But for me, the circle walking, especially when we get to the Baguazhang Qigong, I had talked to you. I think we had a discussion about the association of heat, though there are many qualities, but the association of a particular kind of liquid heat effect that occurs when Qi is being transmitted. And the style I practice, which initiates that heat the most intensely, is the Baguazhang by far. And it has a lot to do with the geometrical structure, and in particular, not just this, but in particular, this turning, sort of spiraling and twisting style that it has. And it gets a lot more involved later on in the art. But anyway, here we are in the stance, and I'm going to begin walking the circle, and I'm going to do it a few times and do the turns as well. And I'm going to try to do the turns in front of the camera, so my step work might not be exactly as it normally would be, because I'm kind of also focusing on making sure that you can see it, and then I'm going to highlight the turning portion. So I'll begin now. Okay, and there's actually a concluding salutation, seal and salutation that we do at the end, but I'm going to get to that later. Right now, what I want to do is I want to highlight the footwork with the camera work I was going to do, where I flip the camera. Then I'm going to highlight how the arms work in the turn. Okay? So let's see. Okay, so here we are. Okay, let's see. Hopefully, so there we are. Okay, so here we are with the feet in the initial position, and we're going to step outward, and we're going to start walking the circle. And then the back foot is coming up. Okay, as the back foot comes up this time when we do the turn, we're going to turn the forward foot out just a little bit, and then the back foot comes up, and you see how the feet wind up being kind of like pigeon-toed toward each other at sort of an inverse 45-degree angle, 45 to 60-degree angle relative to each other. And then you shift the weight to what was the dominant foot but is now the back foot, and turn the other foot so that now the left foot is the forward foot, and we continue walking the circle in the other direction. I'm trying to be really careful here so I don't lose my balance. I'm looking at the camera and looking at the floor at the same time. Okay, and then here, so the feet toward each other, and shift the weight and turn. You can kind of, I'm going a little bit slower than I would normally go, but typically when you're going at normal speed, the sort of turn wouldn't really be on the heel of the foot. It would kind of be on the ball of the foot, and then you continue in the opposite direction. So I'm going to do it one more time. Here, and then in, and shift the weight, and around, and resume. So that's the footwork. And camera on again. Okay. Okay, there we are. So let me show you what's happening now on the top half of the body, particularly with the arms, when the turn is taking place. So right now, I'm in the pigeon-toed formation. I'm in the sort of inverse 45-degree angle formation with my feet. And as I'm doing that, as I'm making that turn, what's happening is the arms are coming in. This is not going to be like the yin-yang formation with the palms toward the body at the level of the shoulders, as we did in the last video, which is the stance preceding the turning single palm. This is different. You bring the arms in like this, with the palms facing upward, one over the other, and this is often called, sometimes called, I should say, overleaf. Okay, like the whole structure is called overleaf. Now, from here, typically, what should happen is, I don't want you to get too worried about this part right now, but typically what should happen is, as you're coming in, the hand that's going to be the dominant hand, the arm that's going to be the dominant hand should be the one in the front, but I don't want you to worry too much about that. So, so you bring the arms in, and then transition upward. This is just like the last form. You bring the arms in, transition the arms upward together with the non-dominant arm, what's going to be the non-dominant arm, around the level of the, transitioning to around the level of the elbow. It should be lower than the dominant hand. So again, here, transitioning upward, and this is when you're turning your body to now shift the feet so that what was previously the non-dominant foot, the non-leading foot, is now the leading foot. So you're turning toward the circumference of the circle again and bringing the hands down so that you're twisted toward the center of the circle with the palm toward the center, and then proceeding in the opposite direction. Okay? So here we go again. Hands in. So this time, since we just did the left hand and the left foot forward, we're doing the right forward, which is going back in the clockwise direction. So the right arm is in front, and we will already be sunk into our stance, really. And then bring the arms up, and as the arms reach the peak, you want to start turning the feet here so that you've done the shift, and then twist so that the new dominant hand is toward the center, and proceed. Going in the other direction. Once again. Oh, I was right. Okay. I was right. In this case, it will be the left arm. Okay. So, okay, here, upward, and then shift the feet, shift your weight to what will be the back foot, the non-dominant foot, and then around, bring the palm toward the center, and walk in the other direction. Again, just one more time. Up at the peak, turn the foot, twist toward the center, and again. Okay? Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to just walk the circle and change directions a few times, more or less as it would be practiced. And then I'm going to show you the concluding seal and salutation, how that looks. I'm going to try to end up in a spot where I'm as in front of the camera as I can be. So here we are. Okay. Sorry, let me do that again. I'm trying to get the steps. You know what I'm going to have to do? I'll have to not worry about how many steps I'm stepping, because I want to I'm focused on making sure I'm in front of the camera. So let me do that again. Now, I wasn't stepping 8 steps per circle there exactly. I was kind of like, I was hyper focused on making sure I was in front of the camera. But what I want to do, it's always going to be 8 steps per circle. Just count the 8 steps and count that as a complete circle. It'll be easier that way to start that way. And then if we progress, we can focus more on that detail. But for now, I want to make sure that you're getting as much of what's happening as possible. So as I was stopping, you're walking the circle, and what you want is, when you're about to conclude, let's say the right foot is forward, you would normally bring the left foot forward and continue walking the circle. This time what you're going to do is, you're going to bring the left foot forward and turn it so that it is parallel, again, to the center of the circle, and then turn the feet so that you're going to have to turn the right foot also. So back foot upward, turn parallel, and then the other foot, turn it to make it parallel with the other foot, so that now you're more or less generally in the same position that you were in when you started. Let me just scooch over a little bit. With the feet about, 4 to 6 inches apart. So once that happens, once you get oriented into that position, then you would lower your hands. So let me do that. So here's where you're going to be. Let me back up a little bit so I'll be more visible. Here's where you're going to be. You bring the hand up, turn, and bring the hands to the side. It's going to be a little bit awkward at first because there's going to be a lot of adjusting, but eventually it'll become kind of natural to do this. But so now the feet are together and the hands are at the sides, and this is all going to kind of flow more quickly. But I'm trying to break it down so that you can see the detail as much as possible. So the hands at the side, and then transitioning directly into, you're not holding the hands at the side. You're just kind of bringing them into a more or less relaxed position at the side, then turning the palms upward and tracing the great sphere. And then as you come down, as you reach the body, you want the palms to turn to face the body down the central channel and outward. This is something you're going to see again. This is something, a principle that's much more prevalent in celestial sphere Qigong, which we're going to get to later. So again, palms facing upward, up, tracing the great sphere, and then palms facing the body down the central channel, and then palms outward, spreading the root. Okay, spreading the energy at the root, and then back to our neutral position with the hands together, one over the other, with the thumb of the top hand gently in the palm of the bottom hand. And you'd hold this position for 10 breath cycles, okay, just to settle the energy. So again, we're walking the circle, and you can start the turn if you want to with either foot actually, but I would recommend starting it. Play with it a little bit. You might actually find, depending on if someone was a dancer or something like that, or depending on your previous experience, you can actually start turning with the forward foot, but the way the weight distribution is going to work, I think it's better to bring the back foot up and turn it into the parallel position, then adjust the other foot to match. I think that's really better, but you can play with it to see what works better for you. So once you're in that position, the hands here, and then we're stepping upward, and they come down gently to the side of the body, and then tracing the great sphere with the palms up to the crown area, and then the palms turning toward the body as they descend the central channel and spreading the energy at the root, and then bringing the hands together again. And you'd only do this once. I just want to make sure. Palms upward, and then down with the palms facing the body, the central channel of the body, spreading the energy at the root, and here. And then hold for 10 breath cycles. Okay? So that concludes circle walking with single palm. And as always, if you have any questions or concerns whatsoever, my door is always open to you, whether it's about this practice or anything else. Please don't hesitate to reach out. And I hope, I'm so thrilled to hear that these practices have been working so well for you. And I look forward to sharing more with you. And I hope that you have a great day. And I'll get this video over to you as soon as it uploads. Okay? Thank you very much, Abby.